Cassidy Hutchinson was the witness who told us all the worst things that we learned about the plot to overthrow the government after former President Trump lost re-election. From Cassidy Hutchinson, we learned that the president was told by his deputy White House chief of staff about the number of weapons and the types of weapons people had brought to the rally site in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. From Cassidy Hutchinson, we learned that the president, having been informed about all those weapons, then ordered that the metal detectors be taken down so the armed crowd could be allowed in with their weapons. He then, as planned, apparently, told that crowd to march on Congress. From Cassidy Hutchinson, we learned that he not only told the crowd at the rally out loud that he would go to Congress with them, he also tried to do it.
He thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, we're not, you don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing. The president had very strong, a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story,
presidential limousine to Congress, and in her telling, physically lunged at the Secret Service agent, telling him that the limo would not be going there. We learned from her as well that the president acknowledged repeatedly that he had in fact lost the election, but he just didn't want to have to admit it. We learned from her that when Trump was told that the rioters had in fact breached the Capitol building and were surging in toward the members of Congress who were trapped inside, he refused repeated requests to ask the rioters to stand down. We learned from Cassidy Hutchinson that when Trump heard that the rioters were calling for the lynching of his vice president, who was on the premises, Mike Pence, we learned from her that he said Pence deserved that fate, that the rioters weren't doing anything wrong. When she gave that testimony, she was 5 years old, and very much alone in the world, and very much without resources.
And very much a liar.
And I mean that literally, about what was new here to me. The new information in this book includes information about bizarre, apparent mishandling of classified information, including some at least previously classified information, potentially still classified information, being carried around in a Whole Foods bag and dropped off with some reporters.
Big news.
There's a strange news story about what the White House chief of staff did in the last 15 minutes that the Trump administration existed on Inauguration Day, something that required him to move with lights and sirens through downtown D.C. to get there before noon, whereupon Joe Biden would become president. There's new information that as early as May 2020, the Trump White House, May 2020, was already trying out the phrase "stop the steal" in messaging about the 2020 election. That's 6 months before the election even happened. There's no confirmation from Cassidy Hutchinson that Trump was mortally ill from COVID, that he was in 4 different jurisdictions on dozens of felony counts. Cassidy Hutchinson says she found the bravery to stop effectively lying by omission, to start telling what she actually knew when she first read the story of this man, a man who had basically the same job as hers under a very different president. Alexander Butterfield had also been effectively chief of staff to the White House chief of staff under President Nixon. Sort of a low-profile, low-name recognition position, but one with access to very high-level, very sensitive goings-on. Like Cassidy Hutchinson, Mr. Butterfield was a loyal Republican, loyal to the president, didn't ever want to be anything other than good at his job and a help to the administration he served. But like Cassidy Hutchinson, Alexander Butterfield also felt he needed to be honest about what he had seen and what he knew. Alexander Butterfield is how the nation learned there was a taping system in the Nixon White House during Watergate.
Yeah, he's probably lying about it.
Cassidy Hutchinson, seen here, meeting with Mr. Butterfield. Cassidy Hutchinson, seen here meeting with Mr. Butterfield after her testimony. She is how the nation learned all the worst things we now know about, as she puts it on page 321, quote, an unhinged chief executive willing to overturn the will of the people and plunge the country into chaos and violence on the advice of crazy people. For what? To avoid the embarrassment of conceding an election he knew he had lost? She said, quote, that is who he is.
Fake news. She's a liar.
In her testimony, we also know that is who she is. She's a paragon of bravery.
She's a liar.
She has a new book out called Enough. It comes out tomorrow. She's here tonight for the interview.
Rachel Maddow repeats Cassidy Hutchinson's lies. Fake news.
Live. Stay with us.
Oh,
yeah. The first live interview you've done in the media. It is the second live interview you have done in life. The first one was your testimony. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and it's an honor to have this as my first live interview. Well, second live interview, I guess.
Second live interview. The first one much more consequential than this one, don't worry. I mean, it's been 15 months since that testimony. Your life has changed dramatically since then. I said, based on what I read in your book, but I didn't ask you about this ahead of time, I said in my introductory remarks that a lot of the reason that people haven't heard from you or seen you out in the world in the last 15 months is, at least in part, because of concerns about your security. Is that fair? Is that still a real life concern for you?
That's a fair assessment, yes.
How are you taking
that was her first question.
taking care of yourself in that regard? I mean, you don't have to tell me anything I shouldn't know.
No, you're fine. Open book. It has been difficult. It has been difficult in a lot of ways. It's open. This year has helped me open my eyes to the dangers that Trump actually poses on people in these situations. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the only one. And I wish I could say I'd be the last person, but unfortunately I won't. And that's what he does to people that he thinks that speak out against him or that detract from him. And it's one of the more dangerous things about Donald Trump, too.
You're a liar.
We've seen time and time again, and it shouldn't have to be like this.
You read about in the book repeatedly about your regret for having not supported him, but specifically for having facilitated some of the political attacks that he launched as president on people that were designed the way he designs them, to hurt people maximally and in some cases to expose them to danger. Did that give you any insight in experiencing to protect Mr. Trump? I mean, some of it was self-directed, right? You say at one point in the book, it struck me, you said that you adored him at one point, that you were and are very much still a Republican, that you believed in what he was trying to do for the country. You wanted to be a good staffer. You wanted to serve the White House. You wanted to do right by your colleagues. And that sort of easily leads toward the next post-presidential project for him, which is protecting him from all the investigations around January 6th and everything else. But that pressure not only came from you, it also came from his world. You didn't have financial resources to hire your own lawyer. You didn't have access to a lawyer at the outset who would represent you for free. You ended up with a Trump world lawyer who you describe as having not told you to lie, but encouraged you to not tell everything that you knew. That pressure is not just a Cassidy Hutchinson she had in life. She had developed herself on her own, as much as a person can do by the age of, 24? When she was subpoenaed to testify, she was very much alone. She was unable to afford a lawyer on her own. She reluctantly, therefore, got one from Trump World. She says that lawyer effectively encouraged her to not tell what she knew. That arrangement lasted for a few of her first depositions until she could no longer live with herself. She finally connected with new counsel who would represent her for free and without what she felt was potentially conflicted loyalty.
Yeah, for free.
And then she told all. She says in her new book, in the prologue, quote, "Before retaining my new lawyers, at times I had told less than the whole truth to a congressional committee charged with investigating a matter of the highest national importance, a matter that posed a threat to America's future greatness." Why do you think your fellow Republicans want him more than they want anybody else as their next candidate for the White House.
I can't speak to the psyche of I won't say my fellow Republicans, because I do not think that we are a part of the same Republican Party.
We are not part of the same Republican Party. You are part of the Washington, D.C. swamp Republican Party that we want nothing to do with.
I still consider myself a Republican. I consider myself a Republican in the sense of Senator Mitt Romney and the Reagan Republican Party.
Romney and the Reagan Republican Party, which are two totally different sides. Fake news.
I believe that the Republican Party needs a strong conservative party. I do not believe that Mr. Trump is a strong Republican. But in this next election cycle, in my opinion, it's the make or break moment for the Republican Party. Now is the time. But in this next election cycle, in my opinion, it's the make or break moment for the Republican Party. Now is the time. If these politicians, these men and some women that are currently in Congress want to make the break and want to take the stand, they have to do it now. We can't wait any longer for them to do it.
President for Joe Biden.
I'm so willing to support him. I think it's extremely disappointing, and it is not a hard issue to take. We're talking about a man who, at the very essence of his being, almost destroyed democracy in one day. And he wants to do it.
This is so stupid. She is a liar. These people are stupid,
he wants to run for president to do it again. He's been indicted 4 times since January 6th. I would not have a clear conscience and be able to sleep at night if I were a Republican in Congress that supported Donald Trump. And everything that is in the book is also consistent with my transcripts that are on the record with with the January 6th committee.
Okay.
Well, everything pertaining to the election fraud.
Yeah.
And Mr. Trump's attempt to overthrow the government to stay in power. All on the public record.
One of the things that you describe in some detail in the book that I don't just quite know what to make of involves your direct boss, Mark Meadows. I've been describing you with the shorthand, and you use this in the book. You say sort of chief of staff to the chief of staff. You're essentially the top staffer to Mr. Meadows. So you're with him a lot of the time. You definitely know what's going on in his life. You're close to him in the work sense every day that he's in the office. And yet there is some mystery that I don't totally understand as to what he was burning in his fireplace.
Dead bodies, Rachel.
In
documents.
Classified or previously classified documents related to Crossfire Hurricane, related to the Russian.
Biden's about to get sworn in, so yes.
What was that about? What was he trying to do?
That specific binder was pertinent to Crossfire Hurricane, which, for the record, at the time, I had no idea what Crossfire Hurricane was. But looking at the bigger picture here, bringing it back to next year's election, these people very well could be in power again. And do we want people who have already shown that they're willing and want to overthrow an election, a duly elected president, which is the pinnacle of our democracy? Do we want
Cassidy Hutchinson is a liar and cheat.
To put people like that back in power? Do we want to put people back in power that have mishandled and have been shown to mishandle the most sensitive national security secrets that our nation has?
Yes, we do.
That's the question that we need to ask ourselves.
There are 6 different allegations about various White House men and Capitol Hill Republican men groping or creeping on Cassidy Hutchinson in this book, although I should mention that 2 of the 6 are both Matt Gaetz, so it's 6 incidences, 6 alleged incidents, but only 5 different men. We'll have more on that later. There's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot, and I'm cognizant that we're going to do a big interview on this. There's a lot to talk about in general, right? In the news right now, it looks like the writer's strike is finally over.
Liar.
You say that he reached his hand under your blazer and then under your skirt. Mr. Giuliani's spokesperson has called this a disgusting lie against Mayor Giuliani. He gave us that statement again himself tonight. But I was struck by the fact that he was not the only one. Page 52 of the book, you say that John Boehner, of all people, looked down at my cranberry vodka and whispered dark liquor or red wine from now on. Then he tugged on the ends of my hair, saying, and lose the ponytail. You describe one man who worked in the White House, Mike McKenna, as having a tendency to publicly single out women with crude and demeaning comments. You describe the president, and this is not groping, this is not physical, but you describe him as telling you to add blonde highlights to your hair, which you then went home and did and came back to them in the White House the next day. That doesn't happen.
And look, she still has her blonde highlights.
Happen in normal places. I'm just telling you now.
Thank you for giving me the option.
Yeah.
I will give Matt credit in his part of his statement that we did have an amicable working relationship, and we were good friends at points. Matt Gaetz, in my opinion, is somebody that I personally do not hold in high regards in terms of trust, and I do not think that Matt Gaetz has the best track record for relationships and condoning his relationships how he thinks that they might be defined. I will say on behalf of myself, I never dated Matt Gaetz. I have much higher standards in men, and Matt, frankly, is a very unserious politician. We see that today with the ruckus that he is causing on Capitol Hill with the spending negotiations. And I don't really have much else to say to somebody that is more concerned about a soundbite than actually passing legislation.
Mr. Giuliani's remark in response.